Hi, welcome. Let's talk about editing poetry. So this video is going to be two parts. First, I'm going to give my general advice, and then I'm going to edit some poems in real time. Step one when editing poetry is to read your poem aloud. Now, this is advice that I would recommend for any genre of writing, but with poetry, there's really no excuse. Poems aren't that long, you have time to read it out loud, and of course, poetry has a long oral history. Poems are meant to be read aloud. There are just some things that you're only going to notice when you read your work aloud. Words that you trip over, things that might sound confusing. Then I would say to just take a look at the big picture of the poem. There are some general questions you can ask yourself. Are there any parts that are vague or confusing? Are you making any references that other readers might not know about that you should maybe add a footnote for? Is there anything that could be made more clear? Are there lines that you could just cut, or are there areas where you need to expand or clarify what you mean? How can you make your poem clear and accessible to as broad of an audience as possible? You're really trying to imagine this poem from other people's perspectives, because there could be a good deal about it that makes sense to you, but isn't going to come through to someone who doesn't even know you. Are there lines which feel like they're trying too hard to be poetic? See my video about my cringy old poetry. This is a problem I have all the time. Conversely, are there lines that feel too boring, too rote, not interesting enough? I personally think it's best to have a balance of challenging poetic lines and more straightforward, easy to understand lines, but of course it all depends on your style and what your intentions are. Next, look at your line and stanza breaks. This should honestly be fun. Especially if you're working on a computer, it's very easy to move lines and stanzas around, change the length of lines, and if you don't like the changes you've made, it's very easy to put everything back where it was before. There are poems that I've been fiddling with the line breaks of for years. So it's a never-ending process, but I think it really honestly should be fun. And I would recommend that if you make line break and stanza break changes, that you should again read it aloud, see how it reads differently, because line breaks and stanza breaks really impact the way that the poem is going to be read out loud. Another general editing piece of advice I can give you is, especially if you're afraid to make changes and you're afraid that it's going to make your poem worse, just copy it, paste it in a new document, and make your changes there. And so if you make radical changes and you're not sure if the new version is better, you still have the old version. Sometimes even just having that version there makes you feel more free to make more drastic changes, which could be very good and very necessary. Next, you can take a look at your poem one part of speech at a time. So look at the verbs exclusively, look at the nouns, look at the adjectives, look at the adverbs, see if you can make any of them stronger. Next step, cutting. Very important, cut any unnecessary words and phrases and lines or even stanzas. Poems should be as tight and concise as humanly possible. Often you can cut articles, you can cut a and the. Part of the beauty of poetry is that you're not confined to complete sentences. You can do really whatever you want. Next, consider your title. Choosing a title for a poem should not be a small thing. It's actually pretty important. What is the title adding? What is it clarifying? What is it maybe challenging about the meaning of the poem? You have a lot of opportunities to create more meaning through the title. Finally, I would recommend thinking about the speaker of the poem. I often lapse into using you when I really mean I. This isn't always a bad thing. It can serve a purpose. It creates a sort of distance that can be freeing for me as a writer. But I always have to ask myself if this is necessary, or if maybe the poem would be stronger if I just used I. You can also, of course, write about other people. You can use pronouns like he, she, they. I often find that this is an overlooked option for beginner poets, and writing fictionalized poetry is often an overlooked option for beginner poets. You don't have to write about yourself. But the most important thing when it comes to the speaker of the poem and the subjects of the poem is consistency. So if you decide you want to use you as a sort of shrouded false I, be consistent. Don't switch back and forth between I and you. And if there are subjects, multiple subjects in your poem, make sure that they're clearly introduced. I often find with amateur poets, they kind of lapse between lots of different subjects and don't make the subjects clear. Grammar still matters in poetry. You can do different stuff with grammar. You can use really unusual syntax, but at the end of the day, you have to think about your reader. Are they going to understand what you're saying? And often I find that people get a little too experimental with grammar to the point where you lose the subject. Who are we talking about? Where are we? Stuff like that. My final piece of advice is you may want to reorder lines or even stanzas. Pay especially careful attention to the first and final, especially final lines of your poem. Your last line should be really powerful. It should probably be the most powerful line in the poem. And sometimes a way to achieve that is just to move things around. If there's a particularly striking line, can you make it the final line? Would that make sense? If so, do it. Now, part 2, let's edit my poetry together. So these are 4 poems that I found in a Google Doc just called Slush Pile. I'm currently working on a full-length collection of poetry, and anything that doesn't make the cut just sort of ends up there. So these are good examples of very, very messy poems. They honestly might not even be salvageable, but let's see if we can at least make them better. Now, I don't have time to do a full edit. For me, this video making brain space is just a very different mode than writing. I have a tendency to underwrite in all genres, so editing for me involves more writing. My poems are usually too short, but I'm not going to be writing in this video, but I will identify areas where I would probably add a line or a stanza or just more is needed. Let's get started. This one's called Winter Meditation. Upon waking, don't forget to shake your dreams out like water from your ears. Lay down on the floor feeling as big as this house. Note your blood's internal wind. Dawn will stretch out to infinity. When randomized rewards get you feeling lonely, close your eyes or go for a walk. Think of winter as having longer nights, not shorter days. When the game show host asks if you want to switch your choice of doors, do it. Now let go of your stomach. Background information. I'm working on a series of poems that are like meditations, and the style is essentially like a guided meditation, a person telling you what to do, but obviously what they're telling you to do is unusual. So that's what's going on here. Right off the bat, I'm thinking the second to last stanza should probably be cut. Great example of a reference. This is a reference to a statistical puzzle. I don't think there's a lot of overlap between people who read poems and people who would know about this, so I think it's confusing, and I also think I don't have a problem with things coming out of left field, as you can maybe see by my writing style, but it's like this whole poem's in left field, and this is just across the street, not even in the ballpark, so I think it's too confusing, and I would cut that right away. I think my line breaks are okay. Nothing's really standing out as being really, really bad. I'm thinking about verbs here. Note your blood's internal wind. I wonder if notice would be a better verb, or I'm not sure right now, but just saying right away, I would probably spend some time thinking about that verb and whether or not it could be made more specific or interesting. Now this stanza, when randomized rewards get you feeling lonely, what I meant by randomized rewards was basically like when you're on a social media site and you get dopamine from the notifications. I don't know if that's clear. I don't know if people would understand that. It seems like that line might be a little alienating. The language is a little bit different from the other lines. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm also thinking I would cut the lines, close your eyes or, because this is a meditation and lots of people meditate with their eyes closed anyway. So when randomized rewards get you feeling lonely, maybe get up and go for a walk. Or just go for a walk. If I want it to be go for a walk, I might change the line breaks a little bit to be more consistent. I'm also not sure about the verb feeling here. Lay down on the floor feeling as big as this house. I kind of like the general concept that this meditation is kind of asking you to embody yourself and let yourself feel big. But as a command, it's kind of weird. Lay down on the floor feeling. Lay down on the floor and feel. Similarly, unsure about will stretch. Dawn will stretch out to infinity. What about dawn stretches out to infinity? Is that better or is that worse? Anyways, those are just some initial thoughts. This is kind of weird trying to edit on camera, I will say. This is called Heard and Unheard. That my skin can burn and change colors. That we can scream along the perfect wind, lost in this multidimensional department store. Is understanding chiefly an obligation of the speaker or of the listener? We practice so as not to be heard making mistakes. Okay, I wrote this a long time ago. I do not remember writing this. I've got a ton of problems. This is a huge mess. This is just a mess. First of all, title, I don't like it. The first two stanzas begin with that my skin can burn and change colors, that we can scream. It feels like the title should be connected to those. If I want to start those stanzas with the word that, I think that could be an interesting and cool technique if the title is somehow, if those are somehow like modifying the title or vice versa. Like maybe if the title were surprising and the lines, that my skin can burn and change colors, because the implication is that is surprising. Something like that, but need a new title, first of all. I'm also not sure I want to start those stanzas with the word that. Like I said, it could be cool with a good title, but I'm not convinced. Let's just see, what would it look like if we did not do that? My skin can burn and change colors. I also don't know how I feel about that line. So what, you know? So what? We can scream along the perfect wind. I have a problem with, I don't think I use adjectives very well. I would probably cut perfect. I do not know why wind is crossed out. We scream along the wind. I think this qualifies as trying too hard to be poetic. So I'm gonna say along with the wind. Lost in this, I do kind of like multi-dimensional department store. I could also see someone rolling their eyes at that. I like it. Next stanza is understanding chiefly an obligation of the speaker or of the listener. I like that, and I think that's the central point of this poem, and it's almost like saying, yeah, I'm talking about a multi-dimensional department store, but is it really my fault if you don't understand me? Finally, we practice so as not to be heard making mistakes. What I had in mind, I think, when I wrote that was music. You know, you make lots of mistakes when you practice so that in a performance, no one hears you making the mistakes. And I kind of like my line breaks here. We practice so as not to be heard making mistakes. To me, part of the function of a line break is that it makes you think about each line on its own. So even though you wouldn't pause after we practice so as not to be heard, the line break makes you think about that sentence in addition to the full sentence, we practice so as not to be heard making mistakes. And making mistakes is kind of unexpected compared to so as not to be heard. But I don't know if any of this is clear, that I meant music. So maybe I would want to clarify a little bit. Maybe I would say we rehearse so as not to be heard making mistakes. I'm not sure. I think this is a great example of a poem that just isn't long enough. You know, if I want to take us to a multi-dimensional department store, this probably needs more connective tissue to get us there or something. Right now there's not a lot of connection between the stanzas, right? This one might not be salvageable, but I do kind of like some of the lines. So what I might do instead is take of stanza, for example, is understanding chiefly an obligation of the speaker or of the listener, and maybe I would just start a new poem with that and try to keep it more focused. Next one, it's called The Sky's Panic Attack. Right away, I do not like this title. I don't like comparing things to mental health problems. It feels a little crass to me, sort of like when people say that they're so OCD because they like to alphabetize their books or whatever. It's giving me that kind of a vibe, so even before I read it, I'm just gonna do that, okay? My mother taught me to always remember the possibility of rain. Bugs in my room keep flying at my computer screen. Bring me the dopamine and a silly straw. Brain last updated. This morning's vomit breath. Tell me about the final moment of your youth and the tastes you don't remember acquiring. Do you even want to get better? I feel bad when I see young girls who look like me. Humid and cold, sweaty and shivering. Television feels especially good when I don't. This one's a little longer and I think a little maybe more salvageable because there's just more going on, more possibilities for connection. I think I need to massively reorder some of these lines. First stanza is probably fine. Bugs in my room keep flying at my computer screen. Interesting choice. What about, there's a lot of different ways I could have phrased this, right? I could have said, a bug in my room keeps flying at my computer screen. I could have specified, like, what kind of bug? Is it a moth? What kind of moth, you know? I think specificity could be needed there. I do like the line, bring me the dopamine and a silly straw. Maybe it's trying too hard, but I like it. Brain last updated, colon. The colon makes it feel like it's connected to the following stanza, but I don't think I want it to be. So I'm not sure what I would do with that. But I would probably add something here. Like maybe just say when. When was your brain last updated? Tell me about the final moment of your youth. I don't know why I have a period there. I'm seeing some lines that I think are connected here. So I'm gonna do a little reordering, okay? I'm just gonna cut that brain last updated line. I don't know about that. So here we have a new version. My mother taught me to always remember the possibility of rain. Bugs in my room keep flying at my computer screen. Bring me the dopamine and a silly straw. Tell me about the final moment of your youth and the taste you don't remember acquiring. I put those together because they're both like commands. This morning's vomit breath. I feel bad when I see young girls who look like me, humid and cold, sweaty and shivering. Do you even want to get better? Television feels especially good when I don't. I think that's a better way of ordering things. The lines that feel related are put together. It's a little better. It's still not very good. Again, I can't do like a full edit on camera, but that's what I would do with this right away. Last one, also very short. It's called April. Scratchy throats cough up the last of winter's regrets. Distill and wallow. The bee arrives before the flowers. You are in your yellow coat. Drawn elsewhere all day and still nothing. That's what you need, a still nothing. Ugh. See, I just want to scrap this. I don't even want to bother. But distill and wallow. Kind of interesting words to pair together. It made me think of swallow because it has the S in distill. I don't know, but I don't think that you should just have some verbs sitting on their own like that. I think I would just cut that, honestly. Yeah. Put a period there. The bee arrives before the flowers. You are in your yellow coat. I like those lines. I think those are kind of nice. And these lines are related, so I would put them together. Drawn elsewhere all day and still nothing. That's what you need, a still nothing. This just feels like very old writing of mine. I don't know when I wrote this, but it feels like like I said in my cringy old poetry video, I think I just used to be so tempted by what felt clever, like still nothing in the first instance feels different than still nothing in the second, right? In the first line, drawn elsewhere all day and still nothing, like you're searching for something and you're not finding it, but then that's what you need, a still nothing, is just maybe like a steady moment of peace. Is that cool enough though? Am I trying to rest too heavily on the cleverness alone? And is that a powerful enough line to end on? I don't think so. Once again, this is too short. I have a tendency to not write long enough poems, to not explain myself, to not give the reader enough. So the main thing I would want to do with this is just write more or scrap it. You know, maybe just, once again, maybe take the lines I like, kind of like the bee arrives before the flowers, you are in your yellow coat. So maybe those are the first two lines of a totally different poem. Remember, I have a Patreon linked in the description. If you want to send me poetry, that is the way to do it. I will give you feedback on one poem a month on the highest tier, or you can just subscribe at a lower tier for extra content. Okay.